Welcome to our international panel hosted by NDS, now part of Cisco. Thanks for coming and joining us, and I hope there'll be a couple of more people coming after they've had their final talk and drink at the lunch break. Now, when I prepared this panel, I realized that we will actually talk about very natural items. We'll talk about the sky, the horizon, and even snowflakes. So this promises to be a very unique panel today. Very unique is also our topic, as it combines technology, content, and most importantly, the consumer. I think that's one of the only panels that actually does that here at the Media Days. And as we all know, and we've seen it in the past, the best technology won't succeed if it's not accepted by the consumer. Therefore, our consumer panel's title is Putting the User Interface First, Advanced User Interfaces for Compelling New TV Experience. Now let me give you an example why I think that user interfaces are so important. As we all know, the internet on mobile phones is nothing really new. It only became a success when Apple introduced the iPhone with its touchscreen, its high resolution, its app world, and most importantly, an easy to understand and simple user interface. As you see, technology is important, but it's no guarantee for success. What makes it attractive to the user is easy handling, easy access. That's what we all want. The iPad is another example for a highly intuitive navigation that even a small child can handle. So as you see, consumers are willing to buy devices even at a high price like the iPad or the iPhone, and they're happy to take up subscriptions despite the high costs when they are happy with the design, the quality, and the usability. The current generation of users, they don't want to first have to obtain a diploma in how to navigate through their devices. They don't accept complex menus any longer. They want easy to understand user interfaces, in the ideal case, knowing how to use it without having to even study the manual. They want not a technology-driven, but an emotional media experience. Let's keep that in mind and take the experience in the mobile world to the world of set-top boxes and TV sets. That's the world we'll talk about today. In this panel, we want to find out how user interfaces have to be designed to make it easier for consumers to navigate through the modern and complex new media world. NDS have made an interesting approach in this area with NDS Snowflake, and that's a new concept to navigate through TV and media content. NDS Snowflake is part of the new and long-awaited Horizon multimedia set-top box that Liberty Global is introducing to their European cable markets. Recently, they introduced it first by UBC in the Netherlands, and by the end of the year, UBC Cablecom in Switzerland will follow. In the first half of next year, Germany will follow with Unity Media and Kabel BW. Now the question is that we're all asking ourselves, could Horizon perhaps be the iPhone of the set-top box industry? We'll find out in this panel. As this is a very visual panel, a very creative and a lively topic, we don't want to bore you with PowerPoint presentations. Instead, we have prepared a short video so you can see for yourself a couple of examples how advanced user interfaces and navigation solutions actually work. So let's look at this video. Okay, the wonderful world of user interfaces. Talking about faces, let me start with the introduction round of the panelists. May I ask you to shortly introduce yourself, your company's role in the area of user interfaces, and round up your presentation by completing the sentence, the perfect user interface has to be, followed by one or two words. May I start with you?
Hi, so I'm Euan Smith. I look after products and operations at Sky Deutschland, which you could describe as all the bits of the business that nobody else wanted. So that ranges from everything from supply chain all the way through customer services. But the reason that I'm sat here today is that I also look after the product development team and the delivery teams, both in IT and technology. So that's kind of a bit about me and what I do. For those of you that don't know, obviously Sky is a small, growing company in the German media landscape. I would if I knew how to do that. Is that on? Okay, cool. Do you want me to start again? Everyone heard me first time? Okay, cool. So, as you'll know, Sky has obviously a big set-top box delivery mechanism presence, both through satellite and through cable. And we're also, I think we're actually number one and the biggest OTT operator in Germany, almost by chance, really, because we have the Sky Go product, which is across iOS, Xbox, and PC devices. And the answer to your question, the perfect user experience, in one word, the word I would use is Genevieve, and that's only helpful to two people in this audience. Genevieve happens to be my girlfriend. So to expand on that for you that don't know her, I would say a user interface needs to be both sexy and frustration-free. So that's me.
Very good, thank you. Now, Roland, let's continue with you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Roland Bohl, and I am responsible for all engineering activities at Loewe. So I have to take the technical part here, I guess. Loewe is a premium brand in Europe. We are offering consumer products, mainly TV. So we have to deal with all these fragmented broadcast, over-the-top services, smart TV, video on demand, and so on. As a premium brand, you need some orientation. So therefore, our orientation is cosmetic design, minimalistic design. It's individuality and meaningful innovation. In the history, it was mainly defined by hardware and mechanics. And now we are going to shift this more and more to the software and the user interface, but keeping the same brand values. From my point of view, UI has to be has to provide an analog experience, since the human being, the human senses are still analog and not digital.
Okay, thank you very much. Quite a surprise, I say. Alex, let's go to you.
My name is Alexander Henschel. I'm managing director of Goetzpartners. We are a consulting company with a strong focus on media, telecommunication, TV business. And I usually have to be, or just I has to sit on our own panel right now, but that one seems to be so interesting that I'm here now. And we support companies from the media and telco industry in building up and setting up projects to create nice-looking user interfaces, but we also support companies in setting up their operations, customer service, customer management, sales, and also strategy part. For me, a perfect user interface has to be, just easy to use, simple, and intuitive.
Okay, very good. Now over to you, Olivier.
Hello, I'm Olivier Lacour, VP Design of NDS, now part of Cisco. I'm acting in the design zone of television since 15 years, with a dedicated focus on user interface since more than 10 years. Many of the images which has been shown in the movie are actually part of the either the Snowflake R&D program or Snowflake go-to-market, talking about Zorn, SFR, and yes, indeed, Liberty Global. And for me, user experience should be simple. And believe me, there is nothing harder than to actually design something simple. Take the tablet industry, for instance, and look at it. And there are many tablets in the field. There is one that really works, besides all the efforts of all the others. So simplicity is a quest. And at Cisco, we are definitely engaged that path. And on top of providing easy-to-use user interface, we are also providing that end-to-end from the software client that we have in set-top boxes and other devices up to the cloud.
I think that's a very good point you mentioned here, Olivier, because the main thing that we all want as industry, B2B industry people, is something for the consumer that's easy to use. Because if it's easy to use, the consumer will understand how to use it and will actually start using it and will recommend it to their friends. And if it's easy to use, it's also fun to use. But that's not easy to make, to achieve. We've all learned, and if we look back in the history, we all know the old days when we tried to program a satellite receiver, for instance. Putting ARD on spot 1 isn't difficult because it's probably already been there. But if you want to program, say, slot number 37 and have the car channel there or a niche sports channel, you'll soon get into trouble. It could take ages and nights, and and then you have a power failure, and it's all back to normal, all back to how it used to be when you bought the box. So, what do you think? That's a question for all of you in the audience. What do you think why is it so difficult to make something that's actually so easy to use? Why is it so difficult? Why has it been so difficult? Perhaps you, Euan.
Because I think quite often you end up designing these interfaces by committee. And in doing so, you tend to, there is a real big opportunity or threat that you lose the essence of what you're trying to achieve because everybody's completely different interpretation of what they think ease is. I know one of the guys at Microsoft that runs Office quite well. And he was saying that obviously designing Office, originally the first look and feel interfaces, was actually done by 3 or 4 people. But then trying to update that some 10, 15 years later when there were 600 million users is an absolute, almost impossible chance because you're going to disenfranchise a huge number of people. So I think we tend to overcomplicate the process by which we create things. And I think that, an agile product development operation that was speaking with its customers, that was trying things, that was seeing what worked and what didn't work is the answer. Yeah, as you know, Apple releases things regularly because they know that if you're happy with your first product, you ship too late.
Okay, Roland, what's your experience as a premium electronics manufacturer on this? Why is it so difficult to make something that's so easy to use?
So as you mentioned, and first I have to fully agree with Olivier, it's indeed a hard job to create it in an easy way. This starts already at school, not for user interface, but it differentiates a good teacher from a not so good teacher, whether he can explain mathematics in a simple and easy way or not, for instance. So comparing it or coming back to user interface, most important from my point of view is first that all the people who are creating such a user interface starts with design, going on with specification, and even the guy who is doing the implementation. They have to look to the user interface from the customer point of view. not just purely from the designer point of view or from the specification point of view or how it's going to be implemented in an easy way. They all have to deal with the subject, in best case by themselves in their home, and they have to live it, and they need the view of the customer, and then it's an important precondition from my point of view to get things done in an easy way.
Indeed, I think that is something we should really keep in mind. A lot of technicians always look through the eyes of a technician, which is good because that's their job, that's what they're being paid for. But actually to develop a product that's consumer friendly, you have to look through the eyes of a consumer. And then you see whether a consumer can actually handle the product, whether it's easy to use or not. Or perhaps maybe give it to your 3-year-old son or give it to your grandma and see how they can use the product. Because if both of these different age groups are able to handle the product without much trouble, then it might be a success. If not, then you have to reinvest again in developing it. Is that something, Alex, that you also recommend to your clients, looking through the eyes of a consumer if you want to have a successful product?
Well, for sure, of course. And it's indeed my impression when I look on different companies that, as Roland Bohl already said, it's the case that most of the companies really not look on a new product from the customer perspective. Instead of that, they really look from the product and technical side on it. And that is definitely often the case why a product is that complicated, because they want to bring all the features they are able to create currently. They all want to bring that on the screen or on tablet or whatever, and that makes it definitely pretty hard.
Exactly, and we should also highlight that a consumer normally doesn't buy technology. That's what companies buy. They buy patents, they buy B2B concepts and models. A consumer usually buys content and easiness in using a product. And I think, Olivier, you'd probably agree.
Yeah, couldn't agree more actually. To answer your question, I would spot the two extremes of the spectrum, and and starting with the fact that how many designers are in the room at the moment, besides me? Yeah, so at least one friend. There is not enough design-driven project in that industry. And that's not okay. How do you expect a project to embrace what design is about when there is hardly no designers in the room? I mean, starting with that. At the other end of the spectrum, there is the end user. And it's about trusting and having faith, because it's close by a religion question. Looking at the journey of, to make something simple land on a set-top box today. To trust the user that they will go for something better. They will go for it. The iPhone is now 5 years ago. The iPod is now 10 years ago. And if I'm not mistaken, looking at the top of the stock exchange, there is an Apple. So it's about trusting the fact that these guys will embrace it.
Exactly. I think if we want to talk about the really the secret of success, it's not so much a technology. Technology is important, but in the best case, it's not even visual. It can't be seen. The consumer doesn't buy technology. The consumer buys a wonderful user experience, a smart user interface, something that's easy to handle, something that's fun to handle. I think we can't mention that often enough, because it's always forgotten when people come and say, we've got a wonderful new technology for you. Well, the consumer asks, why do I need it? Does it make my life easier? As we all know, our lives are terribly complicated. They get terribly more and more complicated each day. So if you present me a product like Apple's done with the iPhone or the iPod that actually makes my life easier, less complicated, brings a bit of fun into my life, then I buy it despite the high price. That's the secret. And now talking about Sky, you've mentioned the Sky Go product already. And I think the Sky product, like a Sky Go product, is something that's a good example for a user interface, and something that basically explains itself to the consumer, how it's necessary, how it's important, how it's convenient to have it, how it, as I was saying earlier, makes your life easier. So, Euan, what's your experience after having introduced Sky Go and other services like Sky Anytime and PVRs to the German market with the new advanced user interfaces? Has it, for example, increased the revenues? Did people buy more pay-per-view movies, order more blockbusters, upgrade their subscriptions, recommend Sky to friends, or even were less likely to cancel their subscription? So did it reduce churn? What's your experience?
All of that? Yeah, all of that. So just repeating what people have said, what we set out to do with Anytime and Go from the start was make something that was cool, but something that actually fitted into people's lives, and something that did not require a 500-page manual before you could start using it. There are two hurdles you have to get over whenever you're introducing a new product in Sky. One is, can the CEO's 9-year-old use it? And the other one is, can my gran use it? And if you crack those two things, then we're going to market. And I guess
secret of success.
And I guess what the headlines, if I was the programming guy from Sky, I'd be sitting here and saying that Sky's had some phenomenal success due to over the last 2 years in terms of in growth due to the programs. Yeah, and I think that you need to remember that the content is first. But I hope that also a large part of what we've done here is over the last 18 months to 2 years in reinventing the product creates a kind of very simple, easy, intuitive ecosystem for customers to get to that fantastic content quickly. And everything that we've tried to launch in terms of the user experience, whether it's on Anytime or Go, is really simple. It's based around carousels, it's based around as few lists as possible, and it's just based on quick clicks. The headline is, can you get to where you need to be in content in 3 clicks, wherever that's possible? So we've tried to do that all the way through, and I think it has paid success. My favourite statistic is that, as you know, Sky's been growing at about 350,000 subscribers over the course of last year. We're doing reasonably well against this year. I need to caveat that by saying we are not there yet, not by a long shot, but we're on a good path. The number that I think is the best number for what Go and Anytime are helping deliver is that well over 40% of all Sky purchases now, new people coming to Sky, are on the basis of recommendations. Now, recommendations take place because you're sat in a train and you've got your iPad and you're watching Go and someone looks over your shoulder. Or recommendations happen because you're in somebody else's house and they turn on the Sky channels and now it no longer looks like the screen of death, it looks like coolness. Yeah, and it looks like something that people want to look at and engage with. Yeah, and I think that in itself is kind of where we're trying to get to, is create this product that is really simple. Yeah, that lets people get to the content that they're after as quickly as we can.
To summarize it in a couple of words, so the product has to be cool, simple, sexy, and useful. And talking to you, Roland, is that the same that applies to you as a premium quality consumer electronics manufacturer? What is the role and the value and the importance you see in user interfaces for your TV sets and your consumer electronics hardware?
As I mentioned at the beginning, the role is going to change or changed already. So I mentioned some values, which means design, individuality, or meaningful innovation, which comes in from the history, from hardware and mechanics. And this is going to change now completely in terms of user interface and software. Let me also give an example for meaningful innovation, or that's a customer not interested in technology. There's a hard disk integrated, not just simple USB recording in the TV sets, but he doesn't recognize it. He don't want to recognize it. It's exactly the same behavior as he's going to control all broadcast. When he's serving in the archive, it's the same like the EBG of broadcast. And this is what the consumer like. This easiness, not talking, not seeing the technology, not needing a manual, as you mentioned. I fully agree also on this. So just use it and enjoy the feature And this is what is important, meanwhile.
Exactly. So what we've learned is the best technology is actually invisible. Because the consumer doesn't have to see the technology. I mean, the consumer doesn't want to see the technology. Nobody's going to take a screwdriver and look into a TV set, whether it's from Loewe or another manufacturer, and see what's in there. What they see and what's important to the consumer is what's appearing on the screen. And that's really where the battle will be won or lost in the end, I think. Now, talking to you, Alex, with the experience and feedback you've had from your clients' projects, what do you think is the role of the user interface from a more overall global market position, and what can you say about the revenue potentials or customer satisfaction, growth against churn, and how is that somehow connected to the user interface?
Well, first of all, it's obvious that the user interface is very important for a company. Let me just give you one number. We often conduct consumer surveys, and one question was how important, or what is the most important thing when you in media usage? Is it, let's say, time shifting or dysfunction? And the most important thing, with over, let's say, 73% of the customers who were asked answered that the user interface and the intuitive usage and ease of use is the most important thing. And that applies not only for, let's say, video on demand players, that applies also for cable operators and all the other players. So this is very important. In terms of what your question was regarding growth, revenue and these things, well, that is not that easy to bring in one relation. I mean, the best example is definitely Apple, what you already mentioned, that, well, the most valuable company. So there is a relation, but what we usually measure is, let's say, the kind of the net promoter score. That means that does customers recommend the product or the service of a company to another client? And what we can see is that if you improve the user interface, especially if we take, let's say, cable operators or Pay-TV operators, there's a strong relation that you can increase that net promoter score by more than 10% in a pretty short period of time. So there's also a relation between user interface, ease of use, and on the other side, let's say, churn rate, which goes down when net promoter score goes up, and also the additional revenue you can create from a customer.
I think that's very important from a commercial perspective for companies looking at investing into advanced user interfaces, and they think, well, is it worth it, or is it going to pay off? Can I actually increase my revenues through it? And when the experience in the market we've had says that actually consumers recommend the product more frequently to other consumers, and they say they order more pay-per-view movies, then actually your revenues per subscribers go up. So a user interface, an advanced, smart user interface, I think that's the message, pays off in the end financially for your company. Now, Olivier, regarding NDS, a little bit looking into the history of NDS Snowflake. It was first presented to the market in 2007, and as we know, 5 years ago, that's like Stone Age in our industry, so a long time ago it was first shown. NDS Snowflake as a new way to navigate through TV and media, on demand and linear television. And in 2010, the largest TV platform in Portugal, called Zon, introduced NDS Snowflake, and it was shortly followed by SFR, another platform in France. And most recently, UPC in the Netherlands introduced Snowflake as part of the Liberty Global Horizon project. As we said earlier on, Switzerland and Germany will follow in a few months. Now, what is the special approach you have taken with NDS Snowflake? What makes it different from other services, from other approaches? And maybe just explaining a bit to the people what sort of world you want to create with Snowflake for the consumer.
Okay. Well, first of all, to answer your first question, good design is good business. No doubt. Look at Apple, look outside at the Audi cars and so on. I mean, it is so obvious. But indeed, the path to there is a long journey. Indeed. Snowflake is not Stone Age, it's this industry's Stone Age. Mm-hmm. We have started an internal initiative in 2007, indeed, at NDS, assuming that we had to reboot big time the core paradigm of the user experience on TV. It was so obvious at that time that the way to organize programs in a linear perspective that then cascades to the grid was not the way the experience should be. The access to deep databases of assets which are on demand is not fitting into a time-based paradigm. It's not fitting to devices which have no buttons. And it's not fitting, obviously, 5 years ago, from that, the iPod kind of simplicity. So we took our courage, and it was a long journey, and we made it happen yearly, making sure that every Snowflake release is more simple than the previous version, and which is also fully integrated and backed up by the capacity of NDS and Cisco to implement, to deliver the level of quality which was expected at the prototype stage. It's very easy to have ideas and prototypes. Where it gets tricky is actually to make it happen for real. So I think that the recipe was to dare, to believe, and to make sure that we were capable to deliver something which was at the same level of quality that we were prototyping. And I think that this is happening right now, and I'm very happy, but actually I'm very happy for the users, because now it's enough.
So what you've done actually is to explain to the people who haven't been familiar yet with the Snowflake system. I think the main new thing you've done is bridging the on-demand world and the linear television world. So it's like conventional television and television that's on demand, and bridging that gap, whereas it used to be in the old days 2 different worlds, no connection. But through an easy, simple to use user interface, it makes it easier for the consumer to access the 2 worlds and to move and switch between the 2 worlds. So it's not so much the question is it an on-demand channel you're watching, or is it a live linear TV channel you're watching? The question is it the content you want to watch at this time, at this location? And I think that's also a general trend of the industry that we can see. It's not so much technology driven, and not so much driven by schedules and by channels. It becomes more and more driven by content. And what's important for the user interface is making it easy for the customer to access the content. The content they want at a certain period of their day, at a certain mood they're in, and present the content to the customer in the most easy way. That is also something that Apple's been doing with great success, and it is now something that obviously new advanced user interfaces want to do for the TV world. The content keeps increasing, but the customer doesn't really care whether it's on-demand or linear content, and the customer, most of all, doesn't care whether it comes from the internet world or from the classic TV world. And is that something, Olivier, that NDS has been doing with the Snowflake concept?
Yeah, well, completely. We have to remind, despite our young age, that our parents grew up with something like six channels like TV. I grew up with cable TV, and I've been lucky enough, my mother to buy me a Macintosh at that time. I think it explains a lot. And my kids are growing up with iTunes. You know, that's what I can see. I don't know if you feel the same, but talking to the young parents in the audience, this is so obvious. So this is really what we embraced. And this is where courage matters. Because you have to be prepared to be said, no, this is not possible. No, it will not happen. No, people won't do it, and so on for years. But this is what we embraced, and this is what we've done, and this is what we are currently delivering. And this is obviously working.
Okay, that sounds good if it's working, but does it work from a commercial perspective for your customer, for a zone in Portugal, or perhaps SFR in France? What are the reports that they've been doing after installing NDS Snowflake? Did they, for example, have more pay-per-view bookings? Did the revenues go up? Did they commercially have more success?
I'll be short on that one. It's a very interesting period because the go-to-market strategies for this kind of products, Snowflake-based, is actually very simple. It's a premium offering that comes on top of the current offering. So we have both on the field old set-top boxes and Snowflake-based set-top boxes related to the same backend. So we can really measure the uptake, user experience, linking to the same VOD catalog, linking to the same channel lineup. On average, it's around plus 10 euro in ARPU. It's about the best anti-churn weapon ever. The latest feedback we got from the Zone experience is 90% satisfaction in the emotional side of it. So they will never turn back, neither to the old product or to the PT product.
Okay,
and
so
last
it's
but not
been a
least,
commercial success. Let me just put a break there, because with Horizon, that is something that's now really the hot topic of the market. And that is something that we all want to know. And the question I raised earlier, do you think, after your experiences you've had with the rollouts of Snowflake, that perhaps Horizon could be something like the iPhone was for the mobile world, that Horizon could resemble that for the TV and set-top box world?
Well, that's a big statement. But what I can tell you is that we've been working for achieving that objective since the last 10 years. And we just started. There are many, many new and beautiful things that you will see popping up in Europe and all over the world in that zone in the upcoming months.
So we'll see in a couple of months, maybe next year, we can draw the first conclusions. But talking about Apple, and as I was saying earlier, if we compare the mobile market with the TV market, there is something we have to address, and that is the difference between the markets. If you look at the mobile market, it's a very vertical market where one company can control the whole chain. But in the TV world, we're talking about a horizontal market. And now that's a question to all of you on the panel again. Could it be that game-changing innovation can easiest be achieved by vertical, fully integrated market models like Apple is doing? Or are open models more strong, and have they got more potential to be successful in the end? That's something like Android is doing with, you know, the Google concept. What do you think?
I think it's certainly easier if you are more vertically integrated. I think people forget that the iPod, iPhone success has sat behind it the whole iTunes success. And I think people sometimes forget that it's not just about the cool product and the UI, but it's the ecosystem that sits behind it. Because a product with a cool UI and no content is not going to go very far. And I think Apple themselves would say that their hobby, which was Apple TV, they've struggled because of that in some areas. So I think it certainly is easier. I think if you had the music industry, the mobile industry type structure in the video world, I think that the person that claims that is going to do extremely well.
Okay. Roland, what do you think?
Before coming to this vertical and horizontal approach, I would like to come back to an important topic you mentioned before, how to bridge, how important is it to bridge this gap between linear broadcast and VOD or all this internet content. And for this, to the customer, the UI is a case, but it takes some time because you need also the right software structure behind in order to handle all this media in the same way. For instance, with our new UI, which we will see very soon on the market, the customer can choose favorites independent where they come from. Independent whether it's a VOD service, it will be side by side with a public broadcast, with a private broadcast, with a music service, or even with a web page. And this must be handled in the software structure. The other, what I would like to mention, that of course it's nice and funny and sexy to deal with all this new internet content and internet approach. What I wonder always is, what's the behavior of the customer? It's coming from the young generation, lean forward, active, with iPads, smartphones, and so on. But what's going to happen when they work 12 to 16 hours a day, coming home, and just would like to enjoy a red wine and enjoying some editorial pre-work of the broadcasters? It's an open question. But since we also have to consider this lean forward and lean backward behavior of the customer. Coming back to this question regarding vertical and horizontal, I think it's quite obvious, due to the ecosystem behind, that bringing new technology to the market, it's much easier with having a vertical approach, because you can define new standards, new codecs, and so on, make a contract, and go straight forward. But the TV market itself is a horizontal market. And this is a challenge, and this is a complexity. And you have to deal with, and especially in Europe, it's even more complexity. You have different countries, it's not one Europe. Within the countries, you have different networks. Say all the networks have different specification and requirements. And besides this, you have to deal with now the same stuff of video-on-demand providers and so on. But at the end of the day, the horizontal approach will be the successful one. I'm convinced.
Okay, so you support the open market, but how far would you go as a company like Loewe, having the Android approach, and a third-party developer comes and says, I want to have an app on your smart TV portal. Do you open the door, or do you have a couple of doubts?
Yes, of course, we open the door, because we have to see this whole value chain, and if a company can offer the right app or the right content which fits to the strategy and offers the premium content, we are more than open for this. No doubt about it.
Okay, now Alex, horizontal versus vertical markets, what's your approach on this?
Well, it's more or less everything said on that topic, but nevertheless, well, currently it's definitely the trend in the direction of a closed ecosystem in a horizontal market. If you look on, well, Apple is one example, but if you look, for example, on also Microsoft, who will also go and produce the hardware stuff, is that the only criteria for success? Definitely not, because if you look on Android, the opposite model that also works, and it's pretty successful. I don't know the exact number, but I guess every day 18 million mobile subscribers are switched on Android, much more than Apple. So both approaches are possible. It depends on the complete situation.
Okay, so there's room for both worlds in your opinion. Olivier, let me raise the Horizon project again. I think that's because it's been invented by a cable operator. A cable operator obviously wants to have a vertical market. Do you think that a vertical market is the right approach for a cable operator and the set-top box industry and the user interface, upselling and things like that?
Well, it's obviously the $1 million question. we have to remind, as said already, that it is hopefully a content-driven experience. Talking about content, it's about TV, it's about application, it's about probably a merge of both, by the way. So there are limits in that zone for vertical integration. Look at how indeed Apple and the Google of this world are struggling, having no content. And at the same time, the other side is indeed a nightmare, being completely Tower of Babelish, completely complex, zillions of chipsets, zillions of softwares, zillions of devices, and so on. I think it's about see things in over time. I would bet on the current paradigm at the moment for the coming few years. Operators still owning the content. They still got the key. It's about upgrading their level of user experience before the Apple and the Google or the Amazons, by the way, of this world are really deciding to invest their zillion money to get into the content zone and then benefit from the vertical approach.
Yes, I think that's a very interesting point you mentioned, especially with the big names Apple and Google coming to the market, because a couple of years ago when that first emerged, I remember, lots of shivering going on at the media days when Apple TV and Google TV were mentioned first, and everybody thought, oh my goodness, now they're going to turn around the whole industry, they're going to change the whole game. Well, I can't see much has happened by then. And Google TV, it's been introduced to Germany, but I don't think we've really noticed it so far. And if you look at other streaming boxes like Video Web TV, they're nice little gadgets, but not really the big market changes yet. Now, a question for you, Alex, from a more neutral market perspective, do you really think that Google TV and Apple TV can actually turn the market around? Can they change the market?
Well, it's as you already mentioned, it's definitely a hard game, and especially Google has to very much to struggle with getting the rights for their platform, and that makes it definitely difficult to bring that content on the platform. But at the end, and in a more longer perspective, I would definitely say these guys will have the money, will have the power to be strong competitors in a couple of years in that market, and will become a strong competitor for the cable operators, the telcos, and all of these guys. So yes, definitely. But give me the chance to that question one round before regarding that horizontal market. There's one example. If you look, for example, on Sky or Premiere, maybe you know that they started in the late 90s with a very closed ecosystem and a horizontal model with the D-Box, which was just one box and one closed system. And then a couple of years later, they opened up the market and said, well, let's go to a different model. Let's go to open that model and give the chance for other set-top box operators to bring Premiere Sky on the TV screen. And that was a pretty successful model. So it's not always the question, horizontal or vertical. Both ways could really work.
Okay, another...
May I add?
Exactly, yeah. I want to ask you anyway about what's your position on this, and what do you think, Roland, could be the market impact of Google TV and Apple TV?
First, a direct statement, answer to this statement, where people like Sky or others were more flexible for other set-top boxes. They still keep their business model with having pay TV, that's fine. But for me, they offered really to a horizontal market, because it's not only possible with other set-top boxes, it's possible with the so-called CI Plus modules, which can be implemented meanwhile in every integrated TV. And this offers a huge market. Okay, the business model is still vertical, is pay TV, but it will work on all devices, on all TV devices. And this is, from my point of view, a horizontal market with a clear standard behind.
Nearly all.
So, you think you agree, Jörn?
Look, if you're a content aggregator and producer, what do you want? You want your great content to get really good reach. Obviously, the terms have to be favourable, but you want really, really good reach for you. So you do the things that you need to do to get that reach, whether that's wholesaling the product in the UK from B-Sky B to Virgin Media, or whether it's here, it's building Sky Plus modules, or whether it's bringing more people to the platform with the HD Plus cooperation, etc. You just want more and more people to be able to see what you've got, yeah, because that's what you're trying to do. Yeah, you're trying to entertain people with television, right? So I think there is a role. I think there is a place for hybrid models. My experience is, though, that if you go too far with hybrid models, you actually start to lose control of it, primarily from a quality point of view, because you end up finding your content isn't being looked after, in inverted commas, as well as you would be looking after it yourself. So I think that's the key thing you have to just be mindful of, is playing with people who have got the infrastructure, have got the same mindset about what brilliant, sparkling quality looks like.
So what I would gather from your comment is that it's equally important to secure your content in the sense of controlling the distribution, but also, on the other hand, making it as easy as possible for the consumer to access it with the device they want, at the time they want, at the location they want. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And now with the location that they want, that's something you've made possible through the Sky Go project. So you can basically take your content with you wherever you are, on your iPhone, on your iPad, and even through the open internet. It's a so-called over-the-top service, as you said earlier. Over-the-top means that it's delivered through the open, free internet and not through cable or satellite or DTT or something else. It's through the internet, the normal internet as we know it, and that's a new distribution method. Obviously, equally important as distribution is the accessing the content and being able to watch what you want, not only where you want it, but the content you want. And you've just had an announcement yesterday. Sky announced to upgrade their electronic program guide, the so-called Sky Guide, with help from the German TV listings magazine TV Digital. They're going to use their program database to enhance their EPG. But I think that's not all of it. You want to redesign your EPG in a more overall way. And I think what you're trying to do, and you can correct me if I'm not right, is you want to have it more as a YouTube platform where you enter a certain type of content you want to see, maybe an actor, maybe a series like The Simpsons, South Park, whatever you want to see. And then the EPG tells you it's available next on this channel, or it's on your hard disk, on your PVR through Sky Anytime, or it's on Sky Go, you can watch it on your iPad, on your iPhone. And it's not so much like in the old days where you use your old print listings magazine and look at ARD, ZDF, third channel. Well, when I have time, let's say 8 o'clock in the evening, what's on at ARD, what's on at ZDF, and so on and so on. That's like the first generation of electronic program guides we've seen. That's something Olivier mentioned. That's like, the Stone Age back then. Electronic program guides in the old days were like resembling TV listings magazines from the print industry, trying to have that on the TV screen. I think we've all realized that that is not the way to go. The way to go is to create a new, smart, a bit more even emotional user interface and user experience. Is that true, Euan?
Well, the first thing I'd say, if you ever get bored of your current job, there's a role for you in our corporate comms team. Because I don't think I could have explained better than you what we're trying to achieve in Phoenix.
I've been a customer being annoyed for years with trying to program my satellite receiver.
You must have been watching the Harold Schmidt thing that took place here yesterday. Look, what we're trying to go with the Sky Guide is, somebody mentioned it before, the customer doesn't care if it's linear or if it's on demand. So the customer finds something. Well, first off, different customers like to find things in different ways, yeah? Some search by channel, some search by genre, some search by Harrison Ford, yeah? So you need to make that available to all those people, yeah? So that it's simple, back to what's a good UI, it's simple for them to search how they want to search. Then when they press the button saying, "I found it," yeah? You then want to tell them their options. Yeah. So do you want to remote record this now because you're out and about and you want to record to Sky Plus receiver at home? Do you want to watch it now because it's available in the Go catalogue and you can watch it right now? We're streaming it. Do you want to watch it video on demand? Yeah. Or do you actually, it's also available and you can watch it whenever you want because it's sat at home in the Anytime catalogue and you can use it then. And you want those 4 options and you want to decide which one you want to do and you press the button. Yeah. And that for me is totally frustration-free, looking and finding what you want to do. And that primarily is what we're trying to achieve with the Phoenix, which is our code name. The Phoenix, the EPG rollout we're trying to do, which is try and get that wherever you are, you're in the Sky world, and you press a button, and you can do all those things. Because as you, the customer, as we've said, I don't care if it's linear or VOD.
I think that's also important if you look at if you say the customer, a certain type of customer. I think we're all certain types of customers by ourselves because at some stage, sometimes we're tired, we're bored, we're even annoyed maybe. We want to just press the button, switch on the television set and see what's on. And hopefully it's something we want to watch and then we keep watching it perhaps until we fall asleep. Another night, we're quite active. You know, we've had our sleep in and now we want to watch something exactly matching what we want to see, and then the interactive feature comes along where you're more of an active, lean-forward customer, what Roland mentioned earlier on, and you want to, look up the options and see what's on, and then decide after, maybe 10 minutes of looking, that is exactly what I want to see now. So we've got the lean-forward and the lean-back customer actually being one person, and I think that's sometimes very often forgotten, that it depends on our mood and on our situation, and not so much on a customer group, like say you're 20 years old, 30 years old, 15 years old, or 60 years old. A good user interface has to be something for all moods and all ages, I think. And well, is that actually something from you who've had experiences with the electronic program guides? Is that something you get as the feedback from your customers? Are they happy with using these features, these interfaces?
I think the answer is yes, they are. Let me give you an example about how you learn as you go. So as you keep iterating, you find out more. We'd had a lot of feedback from user groups and customers that we'd spoken to about Sky Go being really keen to be able to do more lean forward, and they'd be able to engage more with both our Facebook and Twitter feeds during events, but also with their friends' Twitter and Facebook accounts. So we put exactly that into the release of the product that we did. And quite quickly got quite a number of customers that were saying, I absolutely hate this, yeah? I really do not like the fact that it's in my face, yeah? Next release, we still have it there, but it's significantly more obtrusive. I think the default needs to be lean back, but if you ever want to lean forward, if you're in that mood, forward you go. And we've just made it, we've got the things there available for you, but if you just want to sit there, we don't want anything to get in the way of you watching brilliant content.
Is that, Roland, the same experience you've had at Loewe with the customer reactions, the customer feedback?
Ian described it in a nearly perfect way, so definitely what we have to do now, or what's going on now, is to implement a search function, like you mentioned it. But what is even more important than search is really to find it, to discover it. Otherwise, search has no meaning. For this, you have to go away from the standard broadcast service information data and more concentrate of databases which are in the internet. The other step we have in mind is that the system itself can learn by themselves what is the behavior of my consumer, what are their favorites, what should I offer at Sunday evening, and so on. And just one question I would like to ask. You described the new EPG of the Sky World. Sounds good and perfect. Do you cover just the Sky World or really every content?
Let's walk before we start to run. There's 2 people in this room that just had a heart attack at your question, both work in my development team. So what we're doing at the moment is the Sky World.
Because I don't want to attack.
Dot.
I just want to show what the challenge of the poor TV guys is. We have to cover always everything. Public broadcast, private broadcast, pay TV, video on demand, and everything is expected. And this is the challenge, huh? Not to cover just one ecosystem, but to cover all ecosystems all over Europe. Just as a hint.
Now,
where the complexity comes from.
Something you mentioned, Roland, is quite significant, I think, here, and that's personal recommendation. Basically, the TV set, you switch it on, and it tells you, look, this is something I've picked for you that you might be interested in watching tonight, because from the past experience, we know that that is something you could be interested in. For example, let's say, bizarre British comedies or something like that. You used to watch that last night, so maybe you're up for it tonight again. Alex, is that something that's actually being used? Is that something that the users are happy to have? Or is that only something that, once again, the technicians have made up in their mind, but it's not really relevant to the market?
No, it's definitely the case that already exists. You have these recommendation engines for the linear and the non-linear world. As we all know that from Amazon, when we go on the Amazon side and get that recommendation for the products which we usually buy in that direction. So that already exists, but I don't know if any cable operator or pay TV operator has that already in place. I don't know that. But let me just give one answer to your first step regarding these EPGs. What we figured out in our consumer survey is also that currently a huge number of the customers are not really happy with the EPGs. The case is also, but not all of them have brand new Loewe TVs or the latest version of the Sky set-top box. But currently, overall, the customers are not really happy with that functionality. It's too complex, not the right information on it, and all of that thing. So I would say there is definitely more room for improvement in that area, and one part of that could definitely be a kind of recommendation engine.
Olivier, over to you. Basically talking about your experiences in Portugal and countries like France, where Snowflake's been introduced already. What's the feedback and the experiences from consumers there? Do they use these functions like personal recommendations? Is that something they're now used to and they don't want to miss that ever again?
Yes. Well, first of all, starting up with the fact that if we pay attention to the current products, let's face it, people are not using it. There is like 10% of the features available on platforms, on pay TV platform at the moment, which are barely used by the 50% of the customer base.
Why is that?
Well, have you tried it?
I'm not a typical customer. I'm a technology-minded person.
It's kind of obvious. As said, you're going back home, laying on the sofa, and you've got PowerPoint in front of you and the 50+ remote controls in your hand. I mean, what's that? So it's time to change, but to change for something better. Not to change for the sake of changing. It's to face the fact that these products are crappy in terms of a user experience. And it's about moving to something better. The something better is probably, that's the way we are engaging at Cisco, a cloud-based platform which can sync all the devices that you are using, including the TV. Question of TV being still a set-top box is pending. My call on that will be that set-top box will not be there for long. And what we can feedback from the various go-to-markets, providing access from entertainment experience from any devices at any moment, and matching different behavior, different social profiles. Everybody has not an iPad yet. Is drastically booming the level of engagement that people have, the level of satisfaction that they get from the content. So it's clear. It's clear. But again, it's only a start.
Okay, just something interesting, because we were saying earlier that in the best case the technology is not even visible. So you're even now going one step further by saying that the set-top box might disappear completely. Interesting, I think. But Alex, you wanted to say something?
Maybe one comment to add on that. We didn't mention the point of the combination or the integration of social media in that whole EPG topic, and I guess, Olivier, you have also that in your Horizon platform already in the thinking integrated. And if you look on, for example, if you look on Netflix in the United States, over 60% of the VOD takes are used or coming from personal recommendations over social media. So I would say, well, that is also one topic which could be of importance in the future of EPG.
Indeed, the integration with social media platforms, because as we all know, we trust a friend more than we trust an anonymous recommendation engine that just tells us you need to watch that. In the best case, we trust our friends, our family, our neighbors, and that's also with the TV content. Euan, is that something you wanted to mention as well?
So I was just going to go back to the point that was being made about there is no such thing as a typical customer.
Indeed.
So last night I got lucky. I spent 3 hours with Sky customers, and we got onto the subject of the favourites list. One guy didn't know it existed. Yeah. 2 people had just about got around to doing something with it, and one guy said if we took it away, he would probably die. Yeah. So you get there, so you get it, well, is it relevant? Well, I guess it's relevant for a portion of the population, so it's back to make it available and then make it useful to those people that want to have it useful. Yeah?
Exactly, so it's got to be all there, because some people might want to use it, others ignore it, others don't know it's there, and I think that also explains why Olivier said at the very beginning of discussion that with NDS Snowflake, with all the software upgrades they've been making, each software update made it more simple. And I think now we know why. Now, talking about something you've mentioned earlier, Olivier, is the cloud. And I think that's very important regarding the whole talk about the set-top box, storage, capacity, and personalization. A question for all of you. What do you think will be the role of cloud-based systems and, taking away your content and accessing it from anywhere you like? Something like, Apple's doing with the iTunes system, and Google's doing as well with their cloud-based systems. Amazon's doing cloud-based systems. Is that coming more and more to the TV world in your believing?
For me, the answer is obviously yes, because I like quoting these numbers. By 2015, there'll be 15 billion devices that can connect to the internet and 500 billion hours of video content. Yeah, we haven't yet created the hard drive that will deliver 500 billion hours of content. So with that as the backdrop, putting more and more into the cloud and being able to access it from there is obviously the direction that the market is going. However, having said that, I think there is still a role for quite a few years. I kind of agree with Olivier, but I don't think I'm on the same timeline as him about where the set-top box and localized storage is heading. But the direction is very, very clear. Yeah.
So talking about the old D-box from Sky, back then Premiere, at the end of the day, it might just disappear. And with the iPad, the iPhone, it's not there anymore anyway. We don't even have a satellite dish. We don't even need, a cable subscription. We just access the content from wherever we like with the device of our choice. I think that might really be the way forward. And whether it's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years, we don't know yet. Do you think that could happen? That set-top box could completely disappear, Roland?
We are working on this for years.
You've done your best to make it obsolete, but from a market perspective, have you been successful?
Yes, as I mentioned this beforehand, this standardization of CI Plus to get services, important services and successful services all over Europe, like Sky. integrated to the TV. You need a standardization, you have a module, and then you don't need a set-top box anymore. Or like Kabel Deutschland mentioned, the system is quite similar. Since they can offer such kind of a CI module, they sell much more of these modules instead of selling set-top boxes. But nevertheless, to introduce new technologies, for instance, when we look to 3D or maybe Ultra HD broadcast, which is also discussed here on the Medientage with 4K broadcast, you need to have a certain limited ecosystem. You need new codecs, new content, and devices like set-top boxes to bring it to the market. Huh? It's impossible to implement it from the scratch to millions of TV sets. And for this, there will be always, I'm also convinced, a certain market for set-top boxes.
Okay, so there'll still be a market for set-top boxes. Do you agree, Alex, that there is a future for the set-top box?
Oh, well, I'm not fully agree on that. So I would say, well, in the more or less long-term future, I would not like to have a set-top box, or currently I have a couple of set-top boxes in my living room. I don't want to have that, and I don't want to have these numbers of remote controls on the table. But on the other side, I mean, that is also kind of a special challenge for the cable operators, because if all of that content comes over the top and IP-based, then at the end the question is, well, why do I need that cable operator just to provide the, let's say, the dump pipe, the internet access? So that is a challenge, and that is also then kind of the interlinkage to that Google TV and these guys, so that over-the-top content, at the end, that is a challenge not only for the cable operators, but also for Sky, who could differentiate with that, let's say, exclusive content, but nevertheless in the standard content, it's a challenge.
Okay, now we've been talking about the design of user interfaces and the hardware. Let's talk about the actual usage of the user interface. As we all know, in a normal setup, we've got a remote control, and in the best case, it's easy to use the remote control to navigate through the EPG. But what about new systems, new ways to control the navigation? For example, from the games console industry, we know about gesture controls, voice controls, eye recognition controls. A question to all of you on the panel: do you think that that is something that could come to our industry in a few years?
I always seem to go first. Would somebody else like to go first?
Designer?
Yeah, why not? Sure. Well, first of all, to answer your question, yes, the up to the cloud thing will happen because it makes sense from a business perspective. Mm-hmm. We can go deeper into that, but this is the drive. That is the very reason why it will happen for sure. Now it will take some time, but it will happen because it makes sense from a business standpoint. About the future of the thing.
The navigation.
Yeah, well, for now, we are still fighting against a grid and a 50 buttons remote control. This is the situation today. You wouldn't believe how many times I actually have to explain why it's not relevant. I mean, still today. So we are Stone Age. And yes, we have engaged a migration from the monkey to the kind of more evaluated beast, but we are not yet, well dressed in suits, and so far from it. At large, I think, and that's definitely the way we do design at NDS, Cisco, and we will even go further. I'm a strong believer in natural user interface, which actually ambition to lower the distance in between the user and the content. It ultimately dissolves the UI. The UI will not exist. It's about making the distance from the user and the content as thin as possible. And in that respect, everything which is standing in between these two concepts will be removed. there will be many ways to address that.
Okay. What do you think, Alex? Is there a future for the remote control?
Well, I would say yes. I mean, these we already have these possibilities with gestures and with voice steering.
Just your microphone.
Yeah. If you look on that, the Microsoft Kinetic PlayStation is a different product, but nevertheless, many people use that, but not everybody really likes that. So at the end, I would say, well, we will see these functionalities on the screen. We already see that, for example, on the Samsung TVs. But nevertheless, there is another room for the remote control, but not the one we currently have with that 50 buttons, but maybe one as 8 buttons, or how many on the horizon? 8 buttons?
Yeah, 7.
7, okay, 7 buttons.
7 buttons, so even making the remote control more simple.
One which is much more customer focused, easy to use, and much more intuitive.
So maybe at the end of the day, we'll just have a remote control with one button that switches it on and off. So, Roland, what does Loewe do and their remote controls?
First, I would like to come back also to the cloud service. Yes, I also believe that this will be the future, but also there will be a need for linear broadcast just for sport events, live events, news, like this. New items of how to control an end device. I have a funny story. At CES Vegas, there was a guy beside me and mentioned, I even don't talk to my wife, why should I talk to my TV? But I would differentiate. So what I could think about is, for instance, in the bathroom, I don't want to have a remote controller. There, speech recognition would be fine. In the living room, I would agree with Mr. Henschel that still there will be for a long time a remote control. But I would differentiate there. What's the application around? What is the surrounding?
So again, once again, trying to offer all the different options, and the consumer decides which one to use. Is that true?
Yeah, I guess so. We're on the Microsoft Xbox today, and our application, you can watch Sky move around the Sky Guide by talking to the machine, and by swiping the machine, rather. So yeah, it's going to come. Voice will come. Gestures will come. They'll become more mainstream, I agree. I remain disappointed that after several times of asking them, my design team have yet to come into my office with an Iron Man-esque holographic display that does that for me, but that will come. I also think 7 buttons is probably not where we should be trying to be. We should be trying to go to the 1 button. I remember the Mattel Intellivision video game. It was some 15, 20 years ahead of the Apple click wheel. They just never quite managed to get the UI right, so it never happened for 15, 20 years. And then Apple came along and said, well, if you did this with a list on a machine, that would be brilliant. And hey presto, fantastic product. So I think we'll be developing gestures, but I think we'll increasingly be developing the kind of heads-up display type units. My remote control genius who's in the room will be leaving this room with that in his head. Won't you?
Sounds good. That brings me to my last question. And of course, the last question is always something where we look into the future. And so my last question is to all of you, but let's start this time with you, Olivier. So it's always you starting first, Jörn. I think you'll be thankful for that. Anyway, the last question is, how do you expect smart user interfaces to be in, let's say, 5 to 10 years? You can also answer in just 1 or 2 words if you like. Olivier.
They will not exist as a user interface.
Okay. Alex?
Well, I would expect it's even much easier to use than we currently know that. And I would expect there will come very interesting, fantastic new things there.
Okay. Roland?
So I'm convinced things will converge, because till now we have dedicated display devices, a lot of, with dedicated applications. Tomorrow, every application will run on every device. So my vision is that the UI, even says none, will be in one household the same on each device, and the technology will run on a kind of gateway besides the router.
Okay. What's your vision, Euan?
I'm kind of in Roland's tent. I think that seamless is becoming a reality as far as the back end can deliver it. So seamless will be where the UI goes, and everything that is being built today by Sky and by everybody else that I see in the marketplace is to create that single, I'm always in this world, it's a single look and feel, whichever device I am on, my UI is the same. I think that we need, as an industry, to break out from familiar and move to what really is intuitive. And once we've broken that, I think we'll be in the Iron Man Minority Report land.
Okay, so intuitive way to use your user interface is the way to go. So basically you don't need to have a diploma in EPG science, and you don't need to have a 500-page manual 500-page manual to be able to control your EPG. So it's easy handling, I think. That's the key that we're looking for. And if it's easy to handle, then your consumer accepts your product, they use the product, and they recommend your product. And that's especially given in our very complex modern media world. And the important bit there is the user interface and not so much the technology behind it. And as we've learned, in the best case, technology is not even visible anymore. Consumers, they don't really buy technology. That's what companies do. And what consumers are looking for, and that's what we've learned today, I think, is, and they're prepared to spend money on that, is a compelling media experience, something actually very emotional. And that makes, in the best case, their lives easier. And what's easy to use is fun to use. And that's, I think, the simple secret of success. Thank you very much for coming to our panel. Thank you to the panelists, and I hope you'll have a nice remaining day at the Media Days. Thank you.